Our moderator is Jeff Dieffenbach. Jeff is the Associate Director of MIT's Integrated Learning Initiative. He's well-versed in all aspects of learning, from early childhood to K through 12 to higher ed and workplace learning. Jeff's passion is to help educators develop the expertise they need to engage learners on their path to understanding. Please welcome Jeff Dieffenbach.
Thank you, Mark. I will try to quickly get out of the way and let our panelists engage us all with some insights. I'll briefly indicate their names and affiliations and then ask them to elaborate a bit on that, and then we'll get into some questions. If you've got questions during the conversation, just raise your hand so that I can see you, and that'll give us some idea of whether we need to stop with 10 minutes to go or 2 minutes to go. Of course, the order doesn't match the program or my notes, so I'll see if I can jump around. To my immediate left is Dr. Laurie Dodge. She's the vice-chancellor of institutional assessment and planning and vice provost at Brandman University. To her left is Heather Wilmot. She's the lead doctoral research advisor at the University of New England. In the middle is David Leaser. David is the senior executive of strategic growth initiatives for IBM's training and skills program. We have Amrita Thakur. She's the Director of Product Management at Desire to Learn. And at the far end, we've got Sara Cunningham. She works as Senior Program Manager with the College Credit Recommendation Services at the American Council on Education. I first started thinking actively about this collaboration between academia and business when the 2014 report came out by Gallup and Lumina Foundation. 96% of chief academic officers were said to think that they did at least a good job preparing workers for the workforce, and 11% of business leaders strongly agreed with that. Maybe not the best of starts. We have leaders in academia who might say, look, we're about character development rather than career development. And that's great, but you show up and they hand you a bill, right? It's not like you get to go and get your character development for free, because most people actually can't make a living at having good character. Leaders in business, on the other hand, who decry this problem of the entering skills of the workforce, well, they haven't paid a dime for this, so it's kind of hard for them to really say too much negative about what's happening in higher education. The session today, though, is not about these past disconnects. It's about current collaborations and future collaborations. It's reasons to be optimistic. So what I'd like to ask each of the panelists to do in just a minute or so is share a passion that they're currently working on in this space, and implicitly or explicitly, the challenge, the collaboration challenge that it's overcoming. So, Laurie. Thank you.
So the passion at Brandman University that we're currently working with employers is partnership with, the example I'll give is with Walmart. So through Guild Education, Brandman University is working with major organizations in articulating workforce training and learning into credit hour or competency-based education programs. At Brandman, we have 4 competency-based direct assessment programs in addition to credit hour programs.
Sure. Good morning. One of my passions is really deeply connected to both my role as a lead doctoral advisor with the University of New England and my work as a researcher in the corporate world with Core Learning Exchange. Really that passion stems from contributing to the field of the lack of empirical research related to competency-based education, and what does that mean in traditional systems that are outmoded, with the perspective of thinking about pre-K-12, post-secondary, and what does that mean in terms of transforming higher education and the partnerships with local industries and corporations.
And David Leaser from IBM. My passion is democratizing IT and making it available for everybody. In the old days, it used to be you had to go to the right school, you had to be in the right location, and you had to have the right skills. And now IBM is saying, you know what, you don't have to go to the right school, you don't have to be in the right location, you just have to be in the right skills. So we're working on a number of different programs that I think everybody in the room here can participate in and collaborate in and help us do that.
Cool. So I think my passion is sort of focused on two different areas. I think one is more personal to me. You know, I'm a product manager, and I never went to school to be a product manager. I went to school to be an engineer, and a lot of people that are on my team that come into my team don't really come from product management as a background. They come from project management, they come from program management. They've been in customer support, in implementation services, and so understanding how they make that transition and how they become successful product people is important to me, and sort of working with them to do that. On the other side, I think at D2L, we've been starting to do a lot of research, and we've been having conversations with academic institutions that are customers of ours and learning more about how they're building corporate partnerships and how they're leveraging our platform to do so, and really trying to get a sense of, you know, what are some of the similarities in those partnerships versus some of the corporate customers that we work with, so we can continue to think about ways to evolve our platform to meet some of those needs.
Nice. And ACE's credit service really exists to translate and make a connection between workplace and other kinds of non-traditional learning and academia. So we bring teams of subject matter expert faculty into training and educational programs, evaluate those programs based on the expectations of college or university, and then issue recommendations for college credit that those students should receive. And we issue a transcript to them. So the fact that employers are willing to invest in a service like this is, to me, a really encouraging indication that industry is interested in working with academia, that they care about providing those opportunities for their employees. And we know that they do listen to the feedback that they get from our faculty members. They adjust their training programs so that it better aligns with academic expectations. And there are a lot of people out there willing to do that work. And right now, what we're working on, what I'm passionate about, is this pathway that ACE provides has always been sort of a single direction pathway from the workplace into academia, one option. Students both have and need more options today, and so we're working to take that transcript, add workplace relevant competencies to the things that our faculty members are evaluating, and create a modular document so that students can use that learning in more ways than simply attending college. They can use it to qualify for a promotion, to go out and get a better job, to really meet their goals in whatever way works for them.
Great, thank you. So Laurie kicked us off with a tease of an example of a specific collaboration. I'd love to invite each of the panelists, if they have one, to talk about a specific example where an academic institution and a business have worked together, either thinking about the business's needs or thinking about the learning experiences at the academic level, or perhaps both.
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit more about the partnership that Brandman University has with Walmart. We have similar relationship with Discover and Disney. But with Walmart, it really is a co-creation of curriculum and acknowledgement of learning that occurs in workforce training. So Walmart has a academy, Walmart Academy, that many of their employees go through that shows knowledge, skills, and abilities, assessment of their learning, training on the job, so authentic assessment. And Brandman University faculty looked at all of that workforce training, articulated that into both credit hour courses and into competency, so that students can go into a credit hour program or a competency-based program. Walmart has defined specific areas that they want their employees. They fully pay for their education, employees can come into business programs and IT programs, both associate and baccalaureate degrees, with everything paid for. So I think this opens up that door for that accessibility. It's been wonderful at the university because our faculty and our institution acknowledges that that workforce training and learning isn't just something that occurs in a different spot that doesn't count towards degree completion or certification. So it's really, I consider businesses and the institution as co-creators of what that degree looks like and those learning outcomes. And I think it's let's just say, perfect marriage.
Sure. I would like to speak on behalf of the research side of this connection. Part of the work that we're doing is reconnecting and re-engaging local industries in a local community. Part of that work is having the conversations with businesses. For us, it was 65 of those in a local community to better understand where the gaps and patterns are that our young adults and our adults need to be successful, both at the college and the career readiness stages in their lifelong learning journey. That process of re-engaging institutions, both higher education and the PK through 12 sector, to take a look at how that data can be better used to identify the institutional competencies that are needed, the academic competencies, also the personal competencies and the dispositions needed for success, has been a real critical factor in really better identifying what future collaborations for corporations and for organizations like higher education can continue to evolve to look like for transformative approaches, taking a look at traditional models to real contemporary approaches.
Yeah, I have a couple examples, but the big news for IBM is we've taken a really hard look at all of our job descriptions from our chairman's level down to determine what white-collar jobs don't require college degrees, and we call them new-collar jobs. Between 10 and 30% of the jobs at IBM we discovered don't require a college degree at all. So that has really changed the conversation at IBM about who we hire and how we can hire and how we can collaborate with schools in different ways. And some of the programs we've developed, one of them you might be aware of called PTech. PTech is Pathways in Technology Education, College and High School, or Early College and High School rather. We have about 200 PTech schools around the globe in about 13 different countries. And what that is we're adding an extra year to high school to give people an associate's degree and give them the practical skills. You mentioned the disconnect between what schools are doing and so this is actively IBM getting involved and saying, no, we're going to tell you exactly what it takes to get a job at IBM, and we're going to make sure that you're equipped by that 13th year. Another one is we looked at the jobs at IBM and we've really classified at least about a dozen jobs that don't require them, and we're developing curricula around those. Everything from what you'd expect, cloud and blockchain and AI and some of those other areas. We're developing new collar certificate programs that we can syndicate out to you that you can then incorporate into your training programs. And one example is Wake Tech developed a blockchain course with us. The great news is that digital badges provide a transcript or at least a mechanism to codify that information and create kind of a mini transcript.
So I want to talk a little bit about one of our customers, University of Memphis, and a collaboration that they have with their corporate partner, FedEx. So when FedEx was looking for an academic partner to work with, one of the key challenges that they were facing was that there was a significant turnover in their labor force, and they wanted to find a way to increase the retention. And they were focusing on sort of two areas. One was just getting employees to a point where they'd be ready for college courses, and then for those that were ready, to make sure that they could go through and have more exposure to leadership development coursework. Some of the challenges they ran into pretty upfront were it was difficult to have their past experience and their credits be factored in with the academic partner. Most partners that they were looking at had very specific start dates for a semester or a program, which was going to be challenging for someone that was a corporate learner. Billing was a challenge because in a lot of cases there was upfront billing involved, and it was hard for people to go in and sort of make that kind of a financial commitment up front. And in general, there was an admissions process in place, and you'd have to navigate through and make sure that you could clear the admission process and actually get admitted to the institution before you could move further ahead. And so University of Memphis worked pretty closely with them to sort of try and remove a lot of those barriers, and so they had set up a direct billing process with FedEx. They removed the admissions barriers. They made sure that they'd guarantee admission once that you'd complete the college readiness programs. And they worked together to increase the stipend around how much each employee could get annually for professional development, making sure that that would allow them to do what they needed. So this was more sort of on the adoption side, making sure that they could remove some of the barriers to entry. And then the other part that they focused on was, for these learners coming in, what's the right kind of learning experience that we can create within the D2L platform? And so some of the things that they focused on is they actually developed a new competency framework, making sure that they had the right set of competencies structured to get most of the employees to college readiness and beyond. They created personalized landing pages for their students to land into, so they knew exactly what it is that they needed to focus on, who their team was in terms of advisors, coaches, support people, and so on. They created bite-sized learning modules, and so they had videos which were typically about 3 minutes, so students could learn on the go, they could learn when they had time, and they wouldn't really have to sit down in front of something for like hours, and so they structured the content differently. They put in conditional releases so that content could be released as and when you go through certain prerequisites. They had automated feedback in place so you could reach out to the students, making sure that you're engaged. And so they went through quite a bit of collaboration with each other, both to understand how to best get the learners into the system so that they could start learning, and making sure the learning was structured so that they could retain them and get them through the process.
Nice. So the service that I work for really exists to fill the gaps where there aren't strong partnerships between employers and colleges and universities. And I think, those partnerships are the ideal situation. You get a tight alignment, you give students a really clear roadmap to follow, they know where they're going and what they're going to get out of the program. But I suspect anyone at this table would tell you that those partnerships are a huge amount of work. They're very difficult to scale up. And so students have, one choice with that partnership. This is where your experience articulates into or out of. With credit, we have many more choices, but because we lack alignment with things, there's less certainty for students. So we have some great partner schools that write into policy that they will accept ACE credit recommendations, but in a lot of cases, students have to go out and send it in and find out what they're going to get credit for. Is it actually going to articulate meaningfully into a program, or is it only going to be elective credits because the school can't quite figure out that alignment on their own? So I'm really hoping that we can move towards an area where we don't force students to make that trade-off, right? That's going to rely on aligning things, having shared language, open standards, like the ones that IMS is developing for us, so that we can hopefully create a system where students don't have to trade certainty for choice.
I think what I'll do right now is just do a quick follow-up on my own with some of the remarks that have been made, but feel free to riff on it as you see fit. Laurie, you talked about the credit hour or the competency. How does that balance work? Because I think of, historically, it's been credit hour based. A few places have gone out and gone to a competency model. How's it working to have both coexist within the same space?
It's a great question, and it's a confusing world between the credit hour and the competency-based. Today, everything is tethered to the credit hour. So that's our currency in higher education. Even if in competency world is kind of behind the scenes in higher education, that may be worth 2 credits or 3 credits, and things are crosswalk behind. Let me give an example. At Brandman University, we have a Bachelor of Business Administration program that is both credit hour and competency based. Now we know that students need choices, and it also reflects their learning style. So for credit hour, you have true start and stop. So students that need that type of format, they need kind of that structure and schedule, it's a great program for them. For students that may have been in the workforce for 20 years, can actually self-pace through, say they've been an accountant for 20 years, they're probably going to go through those competencies a lot faster, may go slower in the areas of writing or other areas, so they can self-pace through that, and they're, you know, more self-motivated. Now, we have full-time faculty that serve both our credit hour and our competency-based programs. Our credit hour are both online and in a blended format. So it's really in that, Jeff, I think we want to give students choices. The transcript for these, so our credit hour, you have your credit hour transcript. For our competency-based program, you have dual transcripts, and you'll see that probably in most institutions that have competency-based. You'll have your credit hour transcript, and you'll also have your competency, which shows mastery of learning outcomes. So we have to live in both currency, both credit hour, and one day we'll just talk about learning as the currency.
You know, and I think what you brought up is that one of the big disconnects, right? Because at IBM, we want to get people skilled up as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, our customer engagement program is 20 hours of online training, and that is exactly what our digital workplace services group says is needed. So if I think we're stuck in an old model that doesn't really recognize the pace of change. And the pace of change right now is so rapid that we do code drops, you know, every few days on our products.
Yeah.
Heather, you kind of snuck in there that you pulled together 65 local businesses.
Sure.
How'd you do that?
How did I do that? So that was a pretty comprehensive project, and it was more than just 65 businesses. It was eight months of research. It involved educators in the community. It involved students. So it was an interview process, a survey process, and focus groups. And we really, our study team rolled up our sleeves and really had some of the tough conversations that we needed to have about the way in which curriculum is designed, but more importantly, the way in which our young adults, our children, our learners of the future experience their learning. And how do we use that data to then inform purposeful, strategic partnerships, but then also to make meaningful change with not only just in higher education, but the way in which education is designed from pre-K-12 to career. So it took a lot of one-on-one interviews with CEOs of local businesses that were very willing to give their time. So we had CEOs of local manufacturing, IT, HVAC, who not only participated in a single-click survey to give us feedback, but then met with me one-on-one to further unpack their thinking about what skills, not just the academic skills, but the functional predispositions and also those career-ready skills that were absolutely essential for future success and for lifelong learning. So the investment of those partnerships through their time really is a testament for the opportunity for higher education and schools in general to be able to transform through cultivating those.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious to know if those sort of key skills, particularly those functional skills, were a surprise at all, or if it's a matter of communication. Are we talking about the same things but not communicating them to each other well?
Yeah, so the data that actually transpired from our research matched national data, so that was not the surprise. What the surprise was for us, though, is that there's really limited empirical research that brings the voice of our young adults to that conversation. That was what was really unique to our research that contributes to the field. We talked to students about what does it mean to have pathways that are personalized, that have tight feedback loops, and that really have them at the center of their work that is outside of a traditional model. I think that was the game changer for us. Business partners told us our students are not coming to their career with these functional skills, particularly being able to read in a variety of formats, not having the STEM skills needed for success. We hypothesized that would have been true in our research, but it was then validating that through the voice of the students that really pulled that picture together for us.
David, thank you, by the way, for breaking the ice on turning this into a conversation amongst yourselves. That's great. It takes the load off of me, which is fantastic, and it makes it a lot more of an authentic conversation. I don't know the weight tech, is that?
Wake tech.
Wake tech?
Yeah.
So it's about blockchain. Who approached whom, and what was the relative resistance, or just let's dive in and make this happen?
I think there was a let's dive in. And I think about back to that whole pace of change. Why not collaborate with a company like IBM that has to be on top of blockchain and on top of AI and everything else to create a program? So I mean, that's really where it came about. What the great thing was this articulation of credit with badges, which is really tremendous, that we can now use the badges to do those kinds of things. But it's a hard thing to scale, obviously, right? I mean, in that case, it was some of our blockchain experts having to develop the content and fit that content into the existing portfolio that Wake Tech had, then provide expertise to be able to evaluate the capstone projects and everything along the way. So if somebody is out here that can figure out how to scale some of that, that would be great. And back to the part about the unexpected side of work too. I think that's another big part of it. Where apprenticeships are obviously growing. These so-called new-collar apprenticeships or white-collar apprenticeships are growing dramatically. There again, if there's a way to scale that, so people can see the unexpected side of work, because that is a big problem we have at IBM as well.
Amrita, you may not have a perspective on this with respect to University of Memphis and FedEx, just because you're an arm's length removed. But what I understand is that FedEx increased the stipend that a student could get from $3,000 a year to the cap, $5,250, which is the maximum before it starts becoming a taxable benefit to the worker.
That's correct. Yeah.
I'd be curious to know, again, if you've seen anything here, how important was that compared to, for instance, just removing the learner prepays and gets reimbursed model? And is $5,250 enough? That is, if we're going to put our money where our mouth is about the value of education, should it be $10,000? I'm not even sure how much learning a person's going to consume in a year anyway. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I do think the ability to remove the barriers around the billing was pretty critical. I think if they hadn't been able to remove those and allow University of Memphis to directly bill FedEx, the change from like the $3,200 to $3,500 to the $5,250 probably would not have made a significant difference, because you'd still run into the challenge of the folks that are working at FedEx figuring out how do they pay that money up front. In terms of whether the $5,250 is enough or not, that's definitely a tricky question. I don't think I have the answer for that, because I think typically we see, and this is I'd say compared to most industry that I've worked in, like companies that I've worked at, that is a pretty significant amount of money for an industry to put into every single one of their employees within a certain department or within a certain program for professional development. It's usually an afterthought for a lot of people. So I think it's a great start. And since it is per annum, hopefully, continuing to work with Memphis as education scales, as online learning scales, as the cost of education goes down. That's something that should be more manageable.
Sara, to what extent are you acting as something of a generic you in trying to sit between people who are thinking about that path back to higher education, and are you thinking about the other path as well? Is there anything that's that ACE works on that's thinking about somebody going from higher ed to the workforce? And as Sanjay Sarma, who's the vice president of open learning at MIT, he talks about this change from formal education, then informal education over your span, but constantly bouncing back and forth between the two in much smaller doses.
Yeah, so our service is really intended to serve non-traditional, we call them post-traditional learners, who are the growing demographic of learners, right? Our traditional 18 to 20-year-olds is not a growing population, and we know that it's going to keep growing because of this need for lifelong learning, because of change in technology and the speed of innovation in the business world. People are going to have to keep coming back to school. And so one of the key features of a post-traditional learner is they need to be able to move in between work and learning quickly, flexibly, easily, or be doing them both at the same time, while also still having time to live a life. These are folks who are needed wage earners for themselves and their families. They have important roles in their community as an employee and as a learner. And so retooling to serve that audience is not easy. I think it's not that schools are unwilling to serve that population, but it's hard. And so, ACE does try to provide sort of help and thought leadership on how to serve these learners. Specifically, though, I think in the credit service, what we're trying to do with competencies and creating a way of translating between credits and competencies is something that right now we're focusing on making sure that someone can take non-traditional learning and go either to college or to another employment opportunity. But there's nothing stopping us, if we develop a system like this, from translating back in the other direction. So the reason I asked the question about whether or not this is a communication issue is I think we have some of our misalignment is not substantive, it's communicative. That we're not using the same words to describe the same thing, and there's a lack of trust when you try and cross sectors or go in between systems. The sort of assumptions that you rely on don't count anymore. You need systems to help you trust. And it's hard to scale that up. So we are using, for instance, machine learning to try and help us match learning outcomes that our providers write for their courses with competencies that exist in well-established frameworks that we can help the sector gel around and start to get some buy-in for. We're going to have to use those kinds of technologies. I think we can't manually crosswalk everything forever. Everything you do will be out of date the second you do it. If you think about IBM, right, what they're doing for what it takes to be in a job, it's out of date like that. So I'm really hopeful. I see a lot of potential in this technology and the community that's come together around this work to try and figure this out based on open standards, finding common language. I think we're right about to do it.
There's another big elephant in the room, though, is the amount of the scale. I mean, if you look at the number of data science job openings in the United States on any given day, it's a 10-to-1 problem with what the college system is producing. The college system is producing 1/10 of the talent that's needed in the tech industry today. And so there's obviously a huge opportunity for schools to start to create alternative credential programs, but there's also a lot of people that are within reach of those jobs. And if we did a better job assessing what people's skills are and realizing, hey, you know what, they may only be 6 weeks away from that. So at IBM, for example, we're using this assessment tool called My Inner Genius that will look at somebody's skills and abilities and then find the gap and then say, here's what you need to get into this job. And I think assessment is going to play a big role in determining how we can start filling some of those jobs.
Yeah, and the transcript. So Laurie talked about dual transcript, right, is something that a lot of schools are forced to do because of the system that we're working in. But ideally, the transcript should be something that you can present this information in different ways to different audiences. Students should love their transcripts. They don't right now, the traditional transcript. They should be spending all kinds of time with it. It's this amazing record of their accomplishments and the incredible things they did, particularly if it's competency-based, right? It's something, and as these tools get more sophisticated, that transcript should be able to tell them what their next step might be in order to qualify for a job that's out there and waiting for them.
I think that movement with the digital transcripts also allows the badging that you talked about, and so that students don't have to wait to end of a certificate or degree program. They can actually send those badges and send those learning outcomes to prospective employers or for upskilling in an industry to show, look, I don't have to wait to 2 years from now. This is what I have now. The other thing I wanted to add that's helping to address that problem is you're seeing a lot of movement of universities partnering with, let's say, like boot camps. So the Dominican University of California just partnered with Make School so that students going through that, what we in higher education call kind of unaccredited entities, but they're getting knowledge, skills, and abilities, are doing that piece and degree at the same time.
And I just wanted to jump in on the concept of the transcript and really what does that mean for our young adult and adult learners. And ultimately, when you look at it, the traditional transcript is their resume at that point in time. And some of the research that we're extending for a multi-year project is for us to take a look at how do you encapsulate that learning journey for our young adults and for our adult learners, and how do you take that journey, identify clearly what those competencies are, what the learning opportunities are, and where they are at this point to then continue their learning. Hard work, work that is critical in transformation from my perspective, both on the corporate side, but also in higher education. But taking a look at those competencies, unpacking that journey in more than just an educational resume, I believe is a duty to our learners and to the organizations that we serve. So thanks for bringing up that topic.
And I think the connection to jobs is the next part of it that it seems to be, the final mile is often missed, right? If you can show people that these are the jobs that are available to you today, if you're willing to get these couple more courses, this is the job that opened up. Burning Glass did a study on that showed that people coming out of school with, I think it was a bachelor's degree in liberal arts, at any given time in the United States was around 800,000 or 900,000 job openings, and it was, I don't know the exact number, but let's say it was around $40,000 or $50,000. By just getting an additional 6 weeks worth of boot camp training, like you just mentioned, it opened up another 900,000 jobs at a 15% pay premium. And why are we not providing that information to people that are in schools?
So we've got 7 or 8 minutes left. I'd love to see if there are questions from the audience. And by the way, I think at the next IMS meeting, you can look forward to your ACE, I love my transcript, t-shirts and buttons. So.
Absolutely.
And we do have, I believe, a microphone up front, so if you can wait until the microphone gets to you. Here's your chance, or else it's going to be my questions. Great, we've got one up here in the middle section. Oh, and another.
Stand up and yell as loud as you can, Josh.
I'm done with that. The mic is around?
The mic is here, it's coming your way.
I can't yell. Who knows?
But then we miss it on the permanent record.
That's a good thing.
So you've talked a lot about competency models and competency frameworks, and identified a process by which you work with industry to identify their competencies and encode those competencies in your course syllabi and so forth. There are some, here at IMS Global, we just launched the CASE network for K-12 competencies or standards. There's ONET nationally for competencies that the Department of Labor runs, but there is really no mechanism or process by which industry can come to a common set of competencies and frameworks so they're portable across industries or even within an industry. How can we bring, as the T3 network is trying to do, what kind of tactics can we bring to the market to come to a master competency model we can all work against?
So that's the holy grail, right?
Right.
Because you're not only having to link all these things, and you have ESCO in Europe as well, right?
Right, yes, and then also LRMI is working with Schema.org on some as well.
IBM has 2 taxonomy programs at IBM, an internal one and one we bought with Connexa. So, I mean, I think that, and then you have the issue of how do you match the job descriptions to the tasks that are needed, to the skills that you use to develop that, to the way you do it. I think there needs to be a translation service. I think this is an AI job, because it's constantly changing, right? I mean, the ESCO database, our taxonomy at IBM is constantly changing, all the requirements for jobs, because the jobs are changing all the time. So how are you going to keep all of that up to date? I think it's an AI job.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, this is similar to the challenges we've seen in the past with like standards mapping. And when you've got a set of content and you have to map it to 50 state standards, like how do you do that? And typically you've always got a translation or an alignment system in between, but I think now things are changing so rapidly that having something that's not driven by machine learning is just going to be really, really difficult to just keep up with and making sure that the platform and the product are up to date. And this is not something you want to do manually, because the amount of effort to just create all of the connections and keep them up to date is going to be very, very challenging.
This has been so well played, putting the challenge back to the first panel this morning to solve this problem. So,
or to anybody out here to learn what, and that's, you have to learn natural language understanding. If somebody can do that,
Yes, it's a natural language problem because we do a lot of work in mapping the K-12, and there are substantive changes and there are just word changes, and
Exactly.
and there's a lot of subjectivity involved in both the writing and the interpretation of the statements. So I think to do the automated semantic mapping that you're talking about, we need a competency language model that structures the semantics of a competency statement in a consistent way.
Yeah, this is the source of the truth, and everything else can map to that.
More that the competency statement has to have a known structure. Student
yeah.
can do something with something using something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
For
folks
sure.
are working on
competencies.
that.
Yeah, I think there's been a direction, I saw the announcement with IMS Global and Credential Engine on that language that is trying to define competency so that everyone can have kind of that common language. And so I think movement and development in that is a huge step towards that direction.
Probably time for one more question, if anybody's got one. Otherwise, I'll let the panelists volunteer to answer a question that I didn't ask. Anything you've just been dying to say and waiting for this guy at the podium to say?
I'll say, because we started talking about the voice of young adults in this, and I think something that I think is really interesting that comes up over and over again is ACRO and NASPA ran a comprehensive learner record sort of alternative transcript pilot, had 10 schools participating, at 12 schools participating in the first year, and then learning from that in order to build out standards with IMS Global. But a lot of what schools found is that the function that these transcripts can perform when they are competency-based, when they encompass more of a student's life, when they really represent those accomplishments, is not just communicating them to an external audience, but helping the student understand what they've learned and feel confident about what they are able to do so that they can go out there and go after opportunities that they might not have otherwise. David, you told a story at your talk yesterday about a student who really what changed for her after taking some of IBM's courses was her confidence level when she went into an interview to say, I know what I'm talking about, I understand this stuff. It's an equity issue because we can help folks who otherwise might not believe that they are qualified for something reach out if we have tools that tell them, actually, you're just about there. You can absolutely qualify for this job and you should go for it. I think that's going to help us break down barriers that we're trying to break down.
So let's end there, because I think it's great to end on a success story for a learner. We heard it in the first panel, but I think we have to focus on the learner and helping the teacher help the learner. Thank you all for coming. Please help me thank our panel.